Up next, winter is not here yet, but before you know it, it will be. Now is the time to plan ahead when it comes to winterizing your irrigation systems. Market Journal's Mike Straub has this story.
With fall quickly approaching, getting prepared for winter is also right around the corner. When planning for irrigation winterization, one of the most important aspects just might be making a checklist.
Yeah, well, the irrigation season's wrapped up for the most part now with our summer annual crops, and which is always a good relief. And the thing that we need to think about, I mean, if we got some real late planted type of crop, maybe it still needs some water, but for the most part we're shut down now. And the things we need to be thinking about is making a list of what needs repaired on the equipment. It's always a good idea to do a pressure check late in the season. You know, the wells are pumped down, and so we need to have a pressure check this time of year so we know if the system's got enough pressure. That's the number one thing to pay attention to on a center pivot. Is the pressure right? Also on a subsurface drip. And so we always want to be sure and check that at the end of the year. The other thing is make sure you know what needs repaired on the system. You know, unlike a tractor or a combine that we can start up and run in January when we got time to work on it, we can't do that with a center pivot. And so we need to make sure that we get a nice list of everything that needs to be repaired before next season while it's fresh in our minds.
Inspecting the above-ground pipes, ensuring that they are completely drained, as well as making sure the rock trap is not clogged, could also save a lot of trouble in the spring.
Yeah, for the most part, center pivots drain themselves out, but of course the drains can get plugged, and so it's always good to check those. You know, the last thing we want to do next spring is find out we've got something broken because it froze over the winter. You know, dump the rock trap at the end and those kinds of things, and make sure there's any above ground piping is drained back like it's supposed to be. And again, most of that stuff will drain itself, but it's always good to check it. But those are the main things. You know, it's also good to go through the gearboxes and make sure you drain any water out of those. And you know, if you've got a direction you like to park it, I always kind of like to park them towards the southeast. I think they're a little less vulnerable to the wind storms than that, but of course in Nebraska there's no guarantee on what direction the wind's going to blow, but you know, get them parked where you want them and have them ready for the winter.
If you're planting cover crops or wheat this fall, light irrigation may be needed for a nice kickstart for the crops.
You know, the cover crops are a reason we might irrigate this fall, or if we've planted some wheat, you know, we want to get a good stand establishment with that. And certainly if we're going to spend the money on seed for a cover crop, or if we're growing a wheat crop, we want to make sure we get it off to a great start. And so some lighter applications with cover crops is probably a good idea. With wheat, you know, we want to put some moisture into the profile if it's dry and get it off to a great start so it goes into the winter in the best condition it possibly can.
Black layer is a good sign that crops are no longer in need of irrigation. If you need advice on how to spot black layer, it's important to contact your local extension office.
Typically there's some stored soil water in the system, you know, and so you can let the crop use that at the end of the season, but certainly you need to, you know, watch for black layer on the corn as well as on the soybeans. It's a little different to look at there, but you know, we can't really go into that right now, but certainly check in with your extension educator, and if you're not sure how to look for black layer on corn and soybeans. But you know, once they black layer, they're done. I mean, the plants may still be green, but they're not going to get any more yield if you keep putting water onto it. So at that point, you sure want to be done. Typically, I suggest people about the 10th of August start thinking about slowing down and using up some of that stored soil water, because the challenge becomes is that, you know, typically, now last year was the exception, but we get, you know, in the Grand Island area here, somewhere around 15, 16 inches of moisture off season. And so if we can, you know, if we leave the field pretty much at field capacity, that means all of that's going to deep percolate. And it's just water that we don't get to use, plus it takes some nitrates with it. So we certainly want to leave the field as dry as we can in the fall.